Hey everyone. That song cuts out so quickly, and we're of course like rushing, like, hey, should we post a link here or there?
So stall for time. I'm posting the link.
And back to the video. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. We already have Richie Stevens, woo woo, TJ and Brian. Let's go. Thanks, buddy, for tuning in. Dude, for those of you who don't actually, I need to start. Give a shout out to my Patreon members. We got Warrior Bernard, Fighters Maxwell, Foster Q, and of course Defender LG. She is the first line of defense, and she is vicious. You do not want to face her. But thanks to my Patreon members for supporting me and supporting what we do here within the Dying Breed. And now I am super honored, man. It's been a while since Brian and I have gotten to talk. We normally talk behind the scenes, and I've been like, dude, I want to get you on a stream. Let's talk, openly. And you've been a little busy, so how's it going?
Good, really good. So how do you best describe this? So I was like, yeah, I'll totally have the book book 2 wrapped up by end of July. And then that didn't happen. I was like, yeah, only another few thousand words, be grand. And then I had Mallorca for a few days with Dimmy and Chatfield, which was supposed to be my holiday getaway from writing. Go Lions. So I was supposed to be my holiday afterwards, like my reward for finishing the book. But I was writing at the pool being like, oh my fucking God. And then after that, I came back and it was like, hey, we're releasing the game Baldur's Gate 3. I'm like, holy shit, yeah, cool, let's do that. And then it was a wedding, one of my best friends. I was the best man at that, and that went on for 4 days. And then I went to Cologne recently for Gamescom with work, Larian Studios, and then I ended up I'm going to Dragon Con in like 2 days. So in Atlanta. And that is, and they were saying, Brian, would you be fit to do in the Indie Dev conference over in Barcelona, which would be 2 days after Dragon Con? I'm like, no, I need time to lie down and just die, please. So
I think you really captured it, the fact of, just thanks so much for you, because this is literally 10 p.m. at night for you. You are getting back from one major event after a major event after a major event, and in 2 days you are now going to another major event across the world.
Yeah, yesterday morning I got in from Cologne and I was like, oh my God, I have to get back in time for the live stream. And then it's just like, oh, that's tomorrow. Last week I was like, what time is it on tomorrow? Yep. And you're like, that's next Sunday. I'm like, oh.
As soon as you sent me that message, I knew exactly what you were going through. It's like, it's okay, bro. We're good. We got a week.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely killing me. But but look, all is good with me. I always knew August was going to be a packed month, but I'm absolutely delighted to say that book 2 is off to the editors. I had said to myself, you know what? It's totally fine if, book 2 comes in at 160,000 words. It'll be a bit shorter than the first book. And then I finished at 204,000 words. I'm like, what the fuck, Brian? Why are you like this? So yeah, and it was one of those things where I could keep writing chapters. It's like, let's go. And it's like, no, Brian, that's it. That's the end right there. Okay. And yeah. And now I'm like, I should start book 3. And I'm like, or I could fucking lie down for a minute.
Right?
Yeah, so after Dragon Con, if people are like, oh, when's book 2? I'm going to be like, just like shush.
What's funny is we're all going to be wearing Major BJ shirts, so you're basically shushing yourself. Like just putting your finger on the chest.
Darla and Nathan, those pictures. Oh, that absolutely broke me. I thought it was hilarious, but I really, really enjoyed it, to be honest. It was very, very funny. But yeah, it was, for those that haven't seen it, that's watching, Darla and Nathan, good friends of ours that are writers, climbed a fucking mountain in America, which I can't pronounce or don't remember what it was. And they literally were doing Major BJ t-shirts the whole way up, and they took amazing photos. And I was like, wow, I never thought I'd climb a mountain, but there I am, right there. and there.
Where he's like, I would just look behind me and see Brian's face walking up behind me, and so I'd turn around and keep going. So that was awesome, man. And what's funny is you'll get this. So yesterday, Q gave his book pitch. So he, Kionis, who's been my started as a beta reader, went to development editing. Now we get to sign him on and bring him on as our official second writer within Warrior Publishing. He pitched his book, and of course he's getting all excited and he's getting motivated. So he messages me. He's like, I'm going to start writing. I was like, okay, dude, well, go ahead, go for it. Like, you're blessed off, write the story. And he messages me and he's like, I got 700 words and I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I know that feel.
Because I was like, yep, we've all been there, man. Welcome to being a writer.
Yeah, it's this is one of those things where people when you look back on the process after you've written it, I do this thing where I log every single day that I've written. And my average on the days that I wrote was between 7,000 and 9,000 words. And the problem with that is how many of those days existed. Not as many as you would hope. So it's like, I think it was something like out of 189 days for book one, I wrote for 42 of them.
Right.
So it's like, what did you do with the other 147, Brian? And it's like, and we can say, I lay down, I rested, I ate cake. There's just too many fucking things. And I'm like, ugh. But yeah, like I went through each of the days and stuff, and I saw that there was 1 month where I had clearly hit a wall because I only did 3 or 4 chapters that month. And then when I look back at it, I was like, I can see where that blocker was. And then when it was like, maybe after an encouraging conversation with Jez of, screaming, deadline, fire, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should kick it up a notch and write a little bit more. At which point I wrote like fucking 140,000 words in a month and a half. And I'm like, okay, Brian, so we understand that you're motivated by fear. How can we harness this?
That's hilarious. And it's interesting because, there's my record for consistency was when I wrote book 2, it was 3 days in a row of just over 10,000 words, each day, right? 10,000, 1050, whatever. And I was exhausted. I was burnt out. And then when I wrote book 1 of Call Sign Bloodbath, I did 11,000 words in one sitting. And the irony in that is those were the 11,000 words I cut out. Like complete chapter, completely cut it out. So yeah, when I wrote Bloodbath, I was averaging about 6,000 words a day. When I got to book 2 of that series, it dropped to like 4,000. And I don't know what it was, but it was just like this massive trudging of agony to get it. But
absolutely. And like it's very funny where you're just like, why am I doing this? Fear is the mind killer. And then unless you're Brian. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. But no, like it's one of those things where you're like, if you were given all the time in the world to write a book, you would end up going so fucking slowly and overthinking everything, and then iterationitis, going over it again and again and again. But sometimes it's a case of like, is this at a point now where I am happy with the story?
Yep.
And the answer is yes. Actually, how did we get the shine on your head there? Did you not buff up for this? I don't mean the gun show. Did you not buff up here?
There's a little bit there. I just got to get closer here.
Okay. You need some lens flare? If we could just get some lens flare, that'd be great.
Well, that's what we always joked about for land nav, is that I just take my helmet off and I'm the beacon for everyone else. The shine would just reflect off and be like, oh, there's that unit. There's their fire team.
Oh no, sniper. But
no, that's when you go up to whatever troop you hate and you make sure you give them a really firm salute in the middle of the field, like, oh, that's the officer? Snap. Nope, that was the sergeant we all hated. Thank you.
Bye. Oh man. But
Hey, you know what, Michael? You better be shaving your head then. You know, if you want to call me out on my shininess, I expect to see you with a nice shiny head too to take photos at Dragon Con with.
yeah. But with it being Michael, he'd probably shave his head. We'd see a scar on his skull. We'd ask about it and be like, "Oh yeah, back when I got the metal plates put into my head." I'm like, "Was this before or after the lightning strike or the neck being broken?" God damn it! So, but yeah, it's what was I saying? Yeah, so the writing the story. Sometimes when you get those like certain days where you're like really hitting and it's going well, it's amazing. It's a wonderful feeling, and I
Yep.
can't do the discipline that a lot of other authors do of like, I have these 3 hours a day and I sit down and I write for them. I'm like, I will sit and stare at a screen, and then at like 2 a.m. I'll be like, oh, that's it, and then write until 6.
Right.
And then I go to work in 3 hours, which isn't great.
It's not
Juggling
recommended.
full-time job and then the writing on the side is quite difficult. But
Nice.
but yeah, no, getting through it though.
Nice. Well, so let's go ahead and back up for just a second, because for those of you who are tuning in, I mean, we have a lot of people in the chat, like Kyle, Richie, Michael, Brandon. You know, a lot of our guys here in the chat, people in the chat, already know who you are. Mm-hmm. But for those of you who may be tuning in, maybe watching later and don't know, Brian is the author of Quest Academy Silvers, which has just exploded. I mean, has been a bestseller in 3 different categories with over 1,000 ratings and reviews. It's just been massive. So I'm really grateful to have Brian on, and we can talk about that. But Brian, I would love to get to know more about you and your background, where you came up from. So if you don't mind kind of giving us an intro to who you are.
Okay. So I am Irish, from a town called Dundalk, which is in County Louth, in the Republic of Ireland. Lovely, lovely place. Born and raised, grew up here. I have been writing. I thought I was writing since I was 15, when I got my first PC. And I was like, my father said, "You're never going to use that PC." And I was like, "Yeah, I fucking will." And I had no idea what to do other than Minesweeper and Microsoft Word. So I was like, And there was a Chinese calendar beside me that said, "Take a chance." And I was like, Chance. That's going to be the name of my main character. I was like, but it doesn't sound fantasy enough. Let's drop the C and put in a K. Cance. That's going to be my main character. And I literally, at age 15, started writing a story. And it kind of like kicked off from there. So let's fast forward a few years. I'd always been writing. It was called Riverdance, Michael. It's how we got rid of the dragons. That's St. Patrick's Day. Get your facts right, okay? If you're going, but yeah. So essentially, like, I'd been writing throughout, high school and college, university, and things like that. Always in my spare time of, trying to do it. But when I was writing for other people. As in, like, I was always like, putting my friends in as characters to be like, please read my story. You should be invested in it because you're in it. And that was my kind of mindset back then of like, this is shit. No one will want to read it. But if I put them in, maybe they will. And none of my friends wanted to read the stories because they said, they're really good, Brian, but you never finish them. So we'll read it when it's done, which every single writer knows as a fucking stake through the heart of being like, it's just like, yeah, but I need your feedback now.
Yeah.
So I need the little praise and dopamine rushes to be like, the validation that you are good at this, you should keep going.
Yeah.
And
that's such a great thing when you really think about it, because that's actually something I wrote down in my notes that I wanted to talk with you about. But, hey, listen to this song. I'm going to play you this 3-minute song I just did on the guitar. What do you think? Oh, hey, I'm going to go in the track meet. I'm going to go run a race. Okay, we'll come watch you. Hey, read this book. Oh, well, is it done? I don't want to read it.
Absolutely.
It's such this weird dynamic.
It is. And like the other thing as well is that, like, that's one of the first times I realized that the people that I was, thank you, Michael. The people that I was aiming all of this towards were people that weren't necessarily going to be my fans. They were fans of Brian as an individual, but not Brian as a writer. They would be incredibly supportive of that and that journey, and will be there for me every step of the way. And they have been for every step of the way. If you ask any of my friends right now, they are the most, they're like, Brian's going to be a success. Like, no question of it. The last person that seems to know that is me. Like, where I, like, and it's one of those things where I'm like, is this good? And people are like, yeah, it's fucking good. I'm like, okay. So I should keep going? And then like, yes. And I'm like, and people are like, oh, he's just humble bragging. I'm like, no, he's just dumbass. It's so but when I was going through college and stuff like that, you know, it all fizzled away when I started entering the workforce, because I became a recruiter. I was doing that job for 12 years.
You saw my reaction and went to the comments, so we might as well go to it.
So I thought a group of authors was called a procrastination.
Yeah, that's what it is. A procrastinating ego.
Yeah. But
Brandon, one book at a time, brother. I'll get to him as I can.
I was like, fuck, that was for you. I was like, when did I promise that? That's an odd number. I hate odd numbers. But yeah, like I once I started working as a recruiter, I stopped writing almost completely, or I stopped telling people I was writing. So I was writing in the background, but it was only for myself, and a lot of the stories just fizzled out after a period of time. And it was when I was made redundant from Zendesk, my second to last employer there. It came in during COVID, and I was like, you know what? I want to earn money, but I don't want to go back to recruitment right now. So what I'll do is I'll just start writing a story. And that's how Wildcards was born. Wildcards over on Royal Road. And it was kind of the making of me in a way, of how I learned a lot, because I was finally found an audience that liked my stories, that I didn't need to, you know, pawn this off on other people. It was accountability, it was scheduling, it was writing to deadlines. It was literally just kind of like the baptism of fire.
Right.
And it was a whole new ball game that I hadn't even considered before. And I remember after a few chapters, I got my first review, and it was a 3-star, and it broke me, because I had to come to, and the review just said, yeah, this is good, has potential. And it was a 3-star.
So that was one of the things I want to clarify was there a review with it, or was it just a rating and nothing to go on?
It was a review that said, this is pretty good. It's promising start. Yeah. And I had to come to terms with the fact, like, am I a 3-star author? And that was like, this is like, because when your friends tell you like, oh, it's really good, and you're like, I don't trust you. When someone who's supposed, like, is like searching for your story, finds it, gives it a chance, reads it, and doesn't have to lie to you, and they say to you, like, this is a 3-star story. I went on hiatus for about 2 months. And a friend of mine didn't post a thing. A friend of mine made a cover, because she knew I was passionate about the story, and she made a cover for me. And I looked at it, I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. I need to end up doing this justice. I need to, you know, do the cover justice and just kind of go with that. And so I started writing again. And it was, sorry, just 1 second. Oh God, you caught me out in a lie in private chat. Okay, I'm not giving you the pen name, but
that's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll wrap up the Royal Road thing first, and then I'll go back to that, to the other things I wrote in secret.
It's also kind of fun because I basically like broke you in private, and it's also going to come to fruition here in a minute.
But it was, oh, sorry, Michael. Brian will never be made redundant. He might be wasteful, but never redundant. Sorry, not redundant. I was made not employable in that position anymore, as that position no longer existed.
Right.
Ipso facto redundant. So, but yeah, like, so with Royal Road, when I went back to it, I was just kind of like, you know, writing away, and I had a very, very small group of people that were reading it. And eventually it just got to a point where I said, look, doesn't matter to me if this never gets popular. I'm just happy for the little group of dedicated readers that I have, and that's enough for me. And then that was chapter 17 of Wildcards. By chapter 18, I hit trending, which is now called Rising Stars.
Okay.
And then it stayed there for a number of months, and it eventually climbed to number 7 on Royal Road, where Matt Dinneman knocked me out with Dungeon Crawler Carl. And I have no resentment.
Nope, we're bitter. We're just, yeah.
Yeah, I am a fucking
we
lemon.
Remind him
I
every
am
time
a lemon. But yeah, so that's my start.
So there's a lot here that I really want to unpack, and I think it's important too for like young authors. But one of the things that I'm really curious on that I know of, and a few people really know of, you actually have already published some work in a different genre.
I have 18 stories published under a different name, and they were all in the erotica genre, pretending to be a woman. And
so my question about that is, when did you start writing that in comparison to your Royal Road time?
I started way before. So I was on, I think it was Paul Bellow's forums, called the Lit RPG Forum or something like that. And I was on that as, I think Julian was my name, Julian Kantz or something. Because I kept Kantz for every single story I work on. Kantz is always in it because as a little homage to back when I was 15. But I remember it being because I was 29. I was working in Indeed at the time. And I said, I want to publish a book before I'm 30. And it didn't matter to me what it was. And I thought to myself, fuck it, I'll give this a go. Because there was a thing called erotica authors, or erotic authors on Reddit that used to do things called data porns. And data porns are essentially where they would list out all of their statistical information. How many books sold, how many pages read, how many clicks, all of these things. They were essentially my training ground for self-publishing.
Right.
Where literally they would tell you, some of them would even go into genre, some of them would go into all these different sort of things. And I was like, this is invaluable information, and a lot of really, really like invaluable posts. So when I was in there, I was like, fuck it, I'll give this a go. And I, did up some covers. I actually got a graphic designer friend who thought this was hilarious. And she was like, let's fucking do it. And we came up with the fake name and everything, and we went through it. So at one point in time back then, it was, I think, 2017. And I had, and it was like, oh, the gold rush is over. Kindle is dead now. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're going to say that every year. Right now, people are like, Kindle is over, the gold rush is gone. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. We'll see what you say in the next 5 years. But I remember it because I had one story. They had author rankings back then, and I was the 13th most popular paranormal erotica author in Japan. And I literally took a screenshot of that and sent it to my parents and said, are you proud of me? And and they came back and said yes, and they proceeded to tell every single member of my family. My 98-year-old grandmother was like, I always knew there was something about Brian, that he did something like this. And I was like, not sure how to take that, but okay.
I just remember I have to be really careful with this microphone, because if I start laughing too hard, it'll completely cut out and I'll have to reset it. So one of the things I'm curious on, I mean, so I'm reading a romance book right now. It's an indie author here in the local area, trying to support. And I was really curious from a writer's perspective of like how that book is laid out. Because for my fantasy side, I'm like, scene here, we're going to transition to this scene here, we're going to go to this scene. Whereas as I've been trying to read through it and get through it, it feels like it's really planned out from an emotional standpoint. Here I am in sorrow. Here I am now with guilt. Here I am now with self-conscious issues. Is that kind of how that genre is? Is that how you kind of paced out your romance books? Like, how did you do that? And what's different from what you do now?
So I will add a few caveats here. First of all, on the romance side, I would never claim to be a romance author. Okay.
Gotcha.
So I'm an erotica author, and they are two very, very different categories. Now, they can be interchangeable sometimes, or they can influence each other, but they're very, very different. So similar to how price points work. if you were to put up a $20 ebook, people would be like, what the actual fuck are you doing? No one is going to buy that, and you'd get 1 star for it being too expensive. Romance is the same, because romance was always historically 99 cents, because they were making all of their money in Kindle Unlimited. So with the page reads. So that's why they were giant books. And a lot of them follow a simple formula of like Romancing the Beat by, I think it was Gwen Hayes. That's a lovely photo, Geneva. So
it is very nice.
Yeah, it was Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes, I think it is. And that's your like meet cute and like all these things. But the main character of the main theme of a romance story is the romance comes first, and then the kind of like the characters come second, as in like it's the romance is the main, you know, plot of the storyline, and you know everything else is secondary. The difference between a 99-cent, as you know how the pricing models work on Kindle, erotica minimum is starting point is $2.99, and they can be only 5,000 words. So you have either a 99-cent book at 80,000 words in a very, very competitive and saturated market, or you have an underserved niche kink that you're writing at $2.99 a pop, getting 70% royalty. Fuck the page reads, don't even opt into it, and people will just buy it because they've no other choice if they want to get their kink. So that is how I made a lot of money. So I think no, not a lot of money. I think it only made like $5,000, but it's something like 50 quid, 50 euro is coming into me every month, and I haven't written a book in 3 years in those stories.
Right.
But yeah, it's good fun.
So, you know, when you were on that Reddit, like you're learning all of this data, you're getting to analyze it, you're getting to kind of study it and prepare yourself. So you were already, even though it may have been a different genre, even though it may have been a very narrow niche of things, you were able to really practice your craft, kind of focus in. So when you went to Royal Road and Wild Cards, did you change your mindset on the planning of how you were going to create the story and execute? Because I know we always talk about the pantsing and the plotting, and I really hate those terms because I feel like as a writer, as an author, you have to be able to have both at the same time.
Yeah, it's like, did it influence how I write? Absolutely, because all of it is your kind of training wheels. Because being able to write something in a succinct manner in 5,000 words that is going to have a payoff, you know, and stuff like that in an erotica short, you need to be able to make them care about the characters. You need to be able to do all of that in such a short amount of words. So my dialogue was snappy. You're making each of your words count, and you're kind of like like you're essentially becoming ruthless in almost how compact and succinct it becomes. I was not constrained like that with Lit RPG, which was way more fun because I was able to really delve into the kind of the world building elements, the things that really I've always wanted to write in kind of like in the fantasy and science fiction genres, Kyle. Like the erotica was a means to an end. That was just, I want to be published before I'm 30 and I wanted to earn some money from writing. But I was always feeling not resentful.
So here's a question for all those who can see it, but
oh yeah. It became one of those things where I was getting like countless 5-star reviews coming in, but I was like, yeah, but under a fake name. And I wanted something where I'd be able to talk about my writing, because it's not something you can really do when you're under a fake name and people think you're a woman. Like it was really funny, but like I said to myself, you know what, I want to write a story I'd be proud to put my own name on. And that had a few different iterations, but for me, Lit RPG started out with reading The Legendary Moonlight Sculptor, which is a Korean manhwa. Well, it started out as a web novel, machine translated from Korean, and it was VR MMO RPG. And I was like, this is cool. However, it had so many flaws, in my opinion. And I was like, oh God, I'd do that so much better. Oh, I'd write it this way. Oh, I'd write it that way. And then I started reading other ones. And I was like, my God, there were so many cultural things within the Korean stories that I felt, if I could make this so much better for a Western audience, where there'd be none of the face slapping, there'd be none of the scraping, there'd be none of this, or the, you know, the stupid plot lines. And I thought to myself, I'd be able to do this. And when I was writing wildcards, I thought to myself, it frustrated me with so many stories that I had seen of VR MMORPG. They had said that like there are no stakes in VR. And I was like, bullshit. So for me, it was like, I will make you fucking care. And that was how I wrote Wildcards, as in that you have kind of like a classist system, you have a dystopian hellscape future world where, you know, it's all sponsorship deals and it's like esports are like essentially the main form of entertainment. Everyone has a tiered kind of grade of their citizenship, and our main protagonist is an E-classer, where he is literally dependent on social welfare, racked with medical debt, all of these sort of things. And it's about him trying to rise up so that he can survive in the actual real world. And his method of that is this game, which has, you know, a massive millions and millions of people watching. But as I was writing that story, I fell in love with the wrong parts of it. In that I fell in love with writing the dystopian world, the real world. And so many of my readers were like, I love the real world more than the game, which is so weird because the game is awesome, but I prefer him talking about sponsorship deals and talking to these corpo elites and stuff. And some of the reviews that came in were like, man, I would absolutely love to see this author just write in one world, not VR, just like writing this. Like, if I could just read about this one world, that'd be the best book of all time. So around halfway through Wildcards Book 2, I took a break and I hit a wall with the story because it was writing some pretty heavy emotional things that I was like, I don't feel equipped to write this right now. And I took a step back from it and took some great advice. James Hunter, Viridian Gate Online from Shadow Alley Press. He helped me unfuck my plot and was talking me through it. But it was Jez that said, I need to write a palate cleanser. I need to write something that will just kind of get my head away from Wildcards for a little bit and just, you know, kind of get me back on the straight and narrow. And I wrote 50,000 words in 1 week, and it was Quest Academy. I didn't know it was called Quest Academy at the time, but it became so much fun to write that I said, like, you know what? Let's do one world. Let's not, like, scrap the VR. Let's, you know, bring this right down to the basics. What are the things I enjoy? Underdog. Classist themes, you know, bit of sci-fi, and, you know, good sort of like power systems. I was like, okay, I like all these things. And that's how Quest Academy was born.
So that's where it goes back to Brandon's question of what inspired the book. So it was really that palate cleanser and stuff. But I mean, since you had been writing for so many years, and if I remember, don't kill me, but your college degree, you went to France for college?
So it was 1 year of my degree was in France.
Okay.
So it was a marketing degree, and it was the third year was compulsory abroad, and I went to France for a year.
So as you're going through, you know, there's a lot in your story here, right? And so I want to make sure like we chronologically kind of get it, but you really had to overcome some hardship there with Royal Road, with how, you know, you had a little bit of adversity to come through, and then you got through it. You're going, and you're like, man, I need a palate cleanser. I need something to really just take a step back, give myself some time to emotionally breathe, mentally breathe. And then you started in on Quest Academy. So did you always have this idea in the back of your head of like, I want to do an academy setting? And so for years you had kind of just toyed with it? Or was it something where when you started, you kind of reflected back to your experience from college and past school life and just dove into it?
Yes and no. Okay, so this actually goes back to one of your earlier points about your dislike of the terms pantser and plotter. So I would fall very firmly into the pantsing category. But I much prefer the Dean Wesley Smith version of that, which is writing into the dark. So when you're writing into the dark, you don't know where the light's going to be because you're just writing into the unknown. And I think it's a much more romanticist version. You know what? Just to spite you, even though I hate odd numbers, JD, I'm going to stop at book 27. But yeah, it's
Riding into the dark.
yeah. So riding into the dark. Um, so as I was kind of like doing that, I thought to myself, you know what? I have a problem with scope. I have no problem with vision, but I have a problem with scope. I don't know
Interesting.
how to write longevity. I don't know how, the likes of Shirtaloon or Matt Dinneman or all of these people are able to write sagas. Defiance of the Fall by J.F. Brink. I don't know how they write the longevity they have in their series. Because when you look at progression fantasy, it's like, oh god, this is terrifying. So I thought to myself, what if I created a framework that I always knew what was going to be coming next? And an academy setting gives you the semesters. And by having it set up that you have fledgling heroes that are going to be eventually fighting in a demon war, and knowing that they're going to be doing a 3-year degree, then that immediately says, like, well, I have my timeline. I know exactly what's going to be happening for the next 5 years. And that is amazing. And to have that, and like book one came in for like 213,000 words or something, and it only covered month one. And then its book two covers, I think, halfway through month four. And now it's like, so book two is Scavengers, and book three will be Saviors. As we look at the elite class selection at the end of month 6. So the first trilogy, which will probably be around 500, 600,000 words, is going to be the first semester. And that is so fucking relief to me. That, like, I'm like, oh, amazing. So I'm just going, oh my God. Like, I'll wait for the audiobook. Like, so JD, I'll wait for the audiobook.
That's where, hey, not all stories are for all people. So JD, I will say, God bless, good luck. But I probably won't be reading that one.
But like, no, so like, how are people gonna, like, the way it's always like, he who fights with monsters and dungeon crawler cards like DCC and HWF, that's going to be STD.
Yep.
Sexually transmitted disease, BS. Sexually transmitted disease, bullshit. Dating lit RPG. That's how I'm going to remember it. So that's the acronym I'm going to go with, JD. But so where does
then
ball
I'm
hang?
curious of, like, let's move on. Let's just move on before we get way too down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So with you, projecting these 3 books and everything, but you've already got this academy setting, are you planning on really doing like almost sagas and arcs to really finish this whole degree plan?
Yes. So that is the plan that I had in my head. Now, again, this really depends on how well the books do. If there is an appetite for this, because they are a slower pace for a lot of people. They are slice of life. They are, these things. So we'll see what the reception is like for book 2 and then for book 3. And if people are really kind of fading fast on it, then what I'll likely do is like, okay, book 4 will do 6 months. Book 5 will do 6 months. Or I'll speed up the tempo and the cadence of it to, have more things happening. Now, again, like, because I don't want to ever leave a series unfinished. And I don't want to give a bullshit ending. So what I'd like to do is I'd love to do them justice. And if the appetite is there, then I'll write them as intended. And if they do really, really well, then I'll be writing spin-offs of like how different guilds operate in... that's actually quite good. Trash Adventureland Legacy. Like it. So again, like, it depends on the appetite from the readership. Like, if people are enjoying it and they really, really want it, then I'll keep going. The only thing that I'm mindful of is, when do I get back to wildcards? Because I'm excited to write it again. But it'll really depend on my schedule and stuff. So there might be a little bit of a break, but I don't know. As in, it again, once I get this trilogy done, then it'll be a case of like, let's see how we did, and then motor on.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
Brandon, to answer your question, I do have a review of Quest Academy. So if you go to Amazon, the page, and actually if you go in the description of the video, we have links to all of Brian's information. His Amazon page is there. If you go to Quest Academy Silvers, normally if you go into the review rating section, my review has been one of the more favored ones up towards the top. So you can find it there. Or if you click on the images, because I now always upload images with my reviews, I feel like Amazon makes sure to update those faster when you have the product in the picture. So you can find my review that way. But
so like the release did well. It did quite well. Like, so it has a 4.8 average, 1,065 ratings, reviews, 4.7 on Goodreads. It is flooring me, to be honest. As in, like, I had said I'd be happy if we got below 20,000 in the rankings, and to be sitting at the 1,000 and stuff. Thank you, Kyle. But zero pressure on buying hardbacks or softbacks or anything like that. Again, it's just if people enjoy the story, that's what matters to me.
right.
So, and if you don't like the story, I'm more than happy to hear the feedback. There is a few like dissenting voices, but yeah, I'm more than happy to hear those thoughts.
And I'm more than happy to fight them. Like all those low ranks, let's get in the ring. Let's go. I will be the chosen champion to fight on people's behalves.
Yeah,
unless
like,
it's Paul, then Paul he can do his own thing.
It was like I think it was funny because out of like 213,000 words, there was one paragraph which is probably about, let's say, 500 words. So less than 0.025% of the book referenced, I think it was a non-binary character. And someone's like, oh, the fucking White Knight main character is just, I'm like, what the fuck? And I was like, thank you for removing yourself from the audience. It's like, have fun,
it's
bro.
Funny because like I've read some of those reviews, and there was one who was not positive, right? It was, let's just say, not positive. And there were some grammatical errors, and I'm like, really? Because some of the things that they were calling out, I'm like, okay. But yeah, there was some where I'm like, where in the world did you get this like perspective on the story?
Like, it's like there's I'll tell you one thing that blew my mind. I got a really politely worded message on Facebook. It was incredibly polite, and it was almost like and it made more sense after his second message, where he said he was a 73-year-old man, and this was in his top 5 books at the moment. I was like, or something to that level, that I really enjoyed it and wanted to send me a message. And it was just a beautiful thing where I immediately was like, how many fucking books can I get out before, and I like, like, but yeah, it was, but like, honest to God, like that, I live for that shit. As in, I just absolutely live for those moments where you just get the strangest things. I have seen some people that have been like friends in the past that I haven't spoken to in years reaching out to be like, love the book. And I'm like, what? Or surprising people being like, oh, I love it. And I'm like, what do you mean? But the thing that absolutely blew my fucking mind, I saw earlier, was a notification, and I just clicked on it, and it was just like, Felicia Day and 35 other people have liked your post at Quest Academy Silvers. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I need to frame this right now.
Yeah.
No, just have it on the wall, just like touch it from time to time, be like, I was relevant once. But
it's interesting too, because like you said, like your book isn't going to resonate with everyone. And
It
right
won't.
now, I have one book out on Royal Road, and I'm really enjoying it. Like, especially when you get comments and people are having the discussion. Like, I think that's the biggest thing I love about it. Well, there's a certain chapter as I'm watching the data, and almost exactly 50% cut off after that chapter and don't continue. And I'm like, okay, if you can't handle that, I'm glad, because book 2 gets so much worse. And you haven't even made it to the big stuff in book 1. So if that's your draw line and you can't understand why or where things have to happen in the situation, good, it's not for you.
I will tell you one of the most satisfying things on Royal Road, and that is when your fans will literally step in on your behalf. Where if someone says something like, "This is shit, you should change this chapter," literally all of them just like bomb in, being like, "What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Like, what should they change? I'm sorry, that was a terrible critique. What are you doing? What are you doing? The author's doing amazing. Go fuck yourself." And then I'm like giving all of them reputation points, being like,
Yep.
no, just like reward the good behavior.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really funny.
Well, I mean, the thing too is like there was someone even commenting, I think last night, and they were bringing up good points. They were bringing up valid points. And so I'm like, okay. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm going to take your stuff as a grain of salt, because I am blessed to have people like Stephen Landry, Richie Stevens, Nick Boslow, who are all very much in the lit RPG world, who are actively reading the story, and they're giving me private feedback of like, dude, this is awesome, or yep, love this or this. So I'm like, I'm going to listen to their critiques because we've connected further, but I'm also going to take your comments as a grain of salt too, right?
Yeah, and the people that find it naturally and organically, or the people that are searching for it and want to read it, they are always going to be better than the people that are review swapping. Like, for example, I did a review swap back at the start, and it was the first and only one I did. Because I gave him a 5-star, or I gave him a 4.5, because I didn't want it to fucking bomb his, stats or anything like that. And I eventually changed it to a 5-star because I was like, look, I know how much these hurt. So, and I wrote a big long thread of all the things that I thought were great, but the things that made me feel stupid and things like that, like, in the story. And then he sent his review as private feedback, because he said that the story wasn't likely to, that it needed a lot of work before it would be, would be able to do well.
Yeah.
A thing. And I didn't change a thing because I didn't agree with him.
Right.
And that story hit number 7 on Royal Road. And and not to be that person that says like, oh, his stories didn't get past the top 1,500 or anything like that, because everyone has different experience, everyone has like different things. Sometimes things hit at the right time, or sometimes they don't. And the thing is that I killed everything with kindness. Someone was an asshole to me in the comments, I'd be like, thank you for taking the time, because I was genuinely thankful that they took the time to read it. Where people are like, we don't owe them anything, we're giving them this story for free. It's like, but they're giving us their time, because they're reading this and they are immersing themselves in our world, and then we've cut them off at a certain point. And that is not a pleasant feeling. And that's one of those things that I'm always very mindful of. And I'm just so apologetic to the people for Wildcards, because it stopped at a point when I went off to do Quest Academy, and I put in posts, and it was funny. It's like, hey guys, I just
which you still haven't read, Call Sign, have you?
This is Monmouth, isn't it?
Yeah.
I am in that. I've seen my character art. Get fucked, guys.
So that's actually one of the biggest things I hate about Royal Road is getting images inside the text. Like, I've seen some people can do it, but I'm like, yo, this is almost impossible.
Do you know what it is? It's copy and paste, dude.
No, I'm serious.
No. It's not the little image file. It's not uploaded to another thing. It's not get the link. It's not preview. You literally copy it from somewhere and then paste it into the body of the text box. You
But
don't go into the add image part.
yeah, so I seriously select all, copy, paste into the box from my Microsoft Word doc. It will not transfer the image. I've
So
then done the import of Microsoft Word doc for scheduled release. It won't import them. I've tried doing hyperlinks. Like everything I've tried, it's not working. And I'm like, okay, it's not a big deal for book one, but in book two, as you've seen all of the different characters, like it's going to be a huge impact.
I've only been able to do it in the author notes and in the end notes, never in the body of text.
Interesting.
So that's where I usually put my images, rather than in the body of the story.
That's a good, I'll have to do that. So to answer Kyle's question, so Brian challenged me back in, was it December, November? This is when he originally challenged me, is right after Guildify Con, when he and I really connected, started talking, and he's like, dude, you need to write in lit RPG. And so I was like, okay. I started mulling over this idea of like, what could I write? What do I feel would be the most natural thing for me to adapt and use? And so Brian and I, we've had very long conversations. I mean, normally when we talk, it's normally for anywhere from an hour to 3 hours. And so Brian has been a very close friend, a very great fellow author to discuss things with. So I was like, okay, I want to have Brian as a character in my book. And I tried my best to capture a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the discussions and stuff that we've had. So that's where Brian's character is basically like number 2 in the entire story.
But not B2.
But not B2. And so that's the other thing that I've changed. So originally there was 2 Brians. There's Brian Brinkworth, the main character, and there was Brian Nordon. And I wanted to play off of that, but I had someone who was able to give me some insight, and they're like, dude, it's just almost too rough. It's too hard. So that's where Trevor Brinkworth is the main character. Brian is basically the genius who created a lot of the technology that Trevor uses. And also Brian is the one who gets shit on every time Trevor fucks up. So it's kind of fun.
Kind of sounds like our normal dynamic.
Yeah, pretty much. Hey, I'm totally fine with being myself if you get the heat for it from Geneva and Jez and all of our other friends.
Oh, it's like, it's totally fine. Like, I think one of my favorite things when we were in Vegas is that when I introduced Erica to you as, this is TJ Lombardi, she was like, oh, I know who you are. Because she had read Quest Academy, and your character appears in chapter 51 through 53 or 54. And it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, this is cool. But yeah, it's like I have so many authors in my stories because I find it super fun. And like, they're all my friends, and I want to kind of like honor them in that way of to be like, like immortalize them within the story and stuff. But it's really, really fun.
Yeah. So let's kind of move on now to I remember I got to beta read, right? I got to ARC read Quest Academy Silvers long before it ever released. So I think I was reading it back in March, and here we are in August. So the story was clearly finished and written far before that stage when I got it. So we have had some time. When you reflect back on the book one, I don't know if we can really talk about this or not. Is there anything you look back on and wish you had done different? And then also, what have you taken from book one that you really wanted to apply towards book two?
So if I look at the dissenting feedback, if I look at all of the things people have latched onto, it is a difference in it's cultural differences. So the thing is that in Ireland and in the UK, there is, I don't want to say promiscuousness or anything like that, but the kind of the flirtatious back and forth, the charm of like the kind of how we converse, how we talk with each other, and the kind of in university, it's a case of you can meet someone and then 4 hours later, something could be happening there. And whereas I kind of wrote those dynamics and those relationships, but kind of like to be as, kind of flirtatious and all of these things. But a lot of the American readership was like, this is so far-fetched, this is wish fulfillment, this is definitely going to turn into a harem. And I'm like, absolutely fucking not. As in, like, in what way or form does the main character Sal have a temperament for a fucking harem? Like, he's overwhelmed by so many things. He's like, no. But the thing is, like, I think of a reflection on that, I probably would have toned down some of the behaviors of things to make it more suitable for that audience. But even then, that then becomes disingenuous to kind of like the characters that they're based on. So it's a case of like that sort of flirty nature and stuff like this. So I sent the character that one of the characters, Upgrade, is based on. And I was saying, like, do you see any issue with how this was written? It was just like, yeah, I don't curse that much. That was it. I sent it over to the one Hannah was rated, based on, and Hannah was like, yeah, that's cool. I like that. And then I sent it over to the Vanessa, and Vanessa's like, yeah, make her hotter. Like, and I'm like, how? so I'm there, and these are like real women that are telling me it's just like, nailed it. And then I'm being told by men, they're like, women aren't like this. Like you should really learn how to talk. Like,
interesting.
So, and if you actually go, you'll see on comment threads where people are like, hey, I hated this part of the story. And it's a man saying like, this is so unrealistic and disrespectful or whatever. And then a woman from Northern Ireland jumped into the comments and was like, hey, so might be a cultural issue, but this is very real. And this is how it goes. And
I thought moving to Ireland. Here we go.
but that's the thing. So I'm like, like, I don't know how to do that. So like, again, I can tone it down, but I've already toned down so much of the like language isms that I would normally be using for my normal vernacular, but to make it more suitable for an American audience. And even then you're like, what the fuck's a pitch? I'm like, what? And it's just like, oh, a field. Oh my God, damn it. Or like,
I remember I told you that. I'm like, some people are not going to get this.
The amount of fucking things I had to change. And oh God, the fear of the military nation of America when I was going through like one of the firearms that I was writing. I was like, literally, I had 17 fucking tabs open of what is the correct terminology for everything. Because if I say something wrong, I'd be like, the bayonet goes in the top. I'm like, and I'm like, I'm sorry, were you in the French Foreign Legion? Get fucked. Sorry. I swear to God. Sorry.
So the way I did that in Bloodbath was just, I pulled up the manufacturer's website and I basically wrote the specs and then I changed a few things so people could be like, oh, well, that's not accurate. Did you miss the part where I said he changed? Like he upgraded those things? Yeah. Just because you bought it from the manufacturer that way doesn't mean your armor in the back room can't upgrade it like you would a car. Give me a break.
I swear to God, like when I wrote down the range of that firearm and I wrote down magic fucking bullets, magic fucking gun, I just waited there being like, someone's going to say it. The gun can't fire that far. I'd be like, I'd be like, I'm sorry, what magic bullets are you using?
The Pentagon might want to talk to you if you are.
Yeah, it's just like, let me refer you to the movie Wanted, please. Just like, tell me more about how bullets can't curve. But yeah, it was a fun exercise in writing that. But things I would change, potentially toning things down. And is there anything that it informed for book 2? Book 1 was essentially establishing a sense of belonging, overcoming the kind of the imposter syndrome of is this even for me? And do I belong here? And the reader knows the answer, but it takes the main character a journey to figure that one out. And it's a kind of a found family, you could say, almost in the start of it. But coming from a very, very like strong family bond themselves already. But when you move to book 2, it goes from how do we leverage from what is the sense of belonging. It is then a case of facing fears. And facing fears is, and kind of questioning motives and aspirations and goals. It's kind of like finding purpose.
Yep.
So sense of belonging and now finding purpose. And that is a big part of that journey. And I believe then, you know, and I know what the kind of theme will be for the 3rd book.
Yeah. What I love about that too is I love the relationships. Like, and granted, guys, like Brian and I have talked offline, so we've already kind of discussed this, but like I love the relationships that were built in book 1, that dynamic that you're talking about. Because one character, I even told Brian, the character is introduced towards like 3/4 of the book. I did not like that character at first. By the end of the book, I really liked it because of their attitude change and how they really latched into the group. So now, as you're talking about book 2 with like this fear aspect and some of these deeper emotional traits that this character has to go through, that's also when your family is then tested, right? You know, like who's going to stay with you during this time, who's going to, so man, I'm just super excited now to really dive into book 2. So
it's the other thing as well is it's going to be a very big change of pace. In that I don't want to give spoilers, but one of the things that's happened is that there has been elements of complacency. So
like within the world, within the scene, the scenario, the environment,
there has been too much complacency. And essentially what you have as, which doesn't spoil the 1st book, is a case of like the Hunter Bureau, which is one of the kind of governing powers. You have the Guilds, United Guilds Association, you have the Hunter Bureau, and a few other kind of organizations that exist as well. But the Hunter Bureau has very, very strong ties with Quest Academy, which is essentially it's a university for those with powers to learn how to harness them to fight in the ongoing war against demons. And what essentially has happened is that during the events of the 1st book, people that have read the book or people that are going to read the book will notice the absence of 2nd and 3rd years, in that they don't particularly appear within that 1st month, because they have been on an expedition and they have been on a training exercise. And at the start of book 2, they have returned and a report has come in which changes the trajectory of the 1st years, in that the course now needs to realign, and a course needs to maybe adapt to the needs based on the Hunter Bureau's recommendations. And that spells, you know, sort of new opportunities in certain ways and potentially some restrictions. But what it also does is that it also puts the students under the kind of scrutiny of some of the most powerful people in that world. And that is a very interesting dynamic. And it kind of is potentially a jumpstart for a number of them. And that's one of the main kind of themes of it. So there's a little bit more action, a little bit more focus, and a little bit of time away from Quest Academy in book 2.
Interesting. All right. Dude, I love it, man. I love it. So now that you have some time to kind of breathe, you know, book 2 is written, it's off to the editor and stuff. So now that you've actually completed the story, it's out there, you've completed the 2nd story, have you kind of looked at what you are going to change as far as your approach for book 3? Are you actually looking at scheduling, planning differently and approaching it differently?
So this is the thing where book 2, I had a mental blocker with it, because book 2 was where I failed with with wildcards. And that was in the back of my head being like, you're never going to be able to do it. This is just going to be wildcards all over again. You're going to fail and you are going to be a one-hit wonder. You can always write book 1s, but you never write book 2s. And that was something I had to overcome. And that slowed me down so much, because I was there looking at it going like, you're not good enough. This is shit. Nobody's going to like book 1. Why the fuck are they even going to hang around for book 2? Because I had no validation from book 1. I had a group of ARC readers that liked it. I had an editor that liked it. I had a line editor that liked it. I had about 10 people that liked it. And 10 people is not enough for me to kind of be like, go to bed, rest easy. Because I'm like, this is not, in my eyes, at that time when I was looking at it, I was like, this isn't as good as wildcards. And that was a problem for me, because I fucked up wildcards in book 2. So with book 2 of Quest Academy, I looked at it. Now, don't get me wrong. I look back at Quest Academy book 1 and I'm like, I am very happy with that story.
Right.
And I look at book 2 and I'm like, I'm very happy with that story, but I want to know that everyone else is happy with it too. And
because if you change a certain flavor or you move a certain way, are the readers going to be able to flow with you and understand why you took that? So.
And that's exactly it, because you want it to kind of resonate, and it has that staying power. You wonder if there were people that were on the fence with book 1, and if this will be the catalyst that makes them invested or makes them drop off. And you want to retain as many of them as possible and have them enjoy this world. You don't want them to kind of like tap out being like, look, the author fucked it. Because we're only at the very fledgling start of this whole saga. And I want to kind of do it justice, because it's wonderful in my head, and it's only down to my feeling of skill on getting it out on paper. And it's a case of just trying to narrow that gap.
Right.
But I suppose with book 3, I know the start of book 3 and I know the ending of book 3, which makes those parts much easier. And with the way I write, those two will probably just blend together, which makes it very, very good for me. So there's like one of the key components of all the books is crafting, for reasons. And it's like, so that's why you'll always have those elements embedded into it. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of I think it'll be relatively easier to write, but I think that the main challenge will more than likely be book 4, because book 4 will be starting the second semester, and that will then change the tempo completely. What I did like about book 2 is that I was able to sprinkle in a number of things for the future. We get to see some potential origin stories of things that could potentially be very big problems down the line, which is great, that have been hinted at in book 1 and kind of more elaborated on in book 2. And then that might become very prevalent in book 6 or book 5. So, which makes it very, very fun.
Right. It's like, I know I reference X-Men as a way for people to understand like kind of this academy differential thing. And so when you look at some X-Men characters, like that was a big thing, was their past was always haunting them, or their past was somehow tied in. So yeah, there's definitely interesting ways that you can sprinkle in these things that you can always play with later.
So that's the beautiful thing. But even if we use X-Men as an example, if you think of it if you think of like the revamp with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, and you're introduced to Magneto, and you're like, oh, that is a completely reasonable and understandable man. That's a great, great character. I'm rooting for him. He's my favorite hero. And you see like his son, Pietro Maximoff, and you're like, oh, there he is. There's Quicksilver. What a good guy. And that's the way, like, I'm writing a lot of these characters, and you're like, wow, those are my favorite heroes. And it's And as time goes on, I want to potentially write their progressions in whatever direction those may be. I'm not saying that I'm trying to write villain origin stories, but if you've read Wildcards, you know I love villains. So
yeah. Getting back to Brandon, will there ever be a TJ Bryan co-written book? For my answer to this question, so I am already co-authoring a series with one of my Patreon members, one of my good friends, followers, Ryan Maxwell. That was supposed to be my palate cleanser between the Dying Breed and Call Sign Bloodbath series. What I will say is, when Ryan and I went into this venture, it was, dude, we're not going to have any expectations. We're just going to do this. Let's see, how it goes. Let's XYZ. What I've already found is I'm revising and editing book 3 in the Dying Breed, getting it ready for editing. While I was supposed to be writing in this Project Kepler, I was able to get my part of Project Kepler written. And then I said, dude, I'm handing it back over to you. It's too mentally taxing right now. So for me, starting to feel out and see like how the co-authoring thing works and balancing out multiple series, I would say I don't foresee other co-author projects just because of the extra amount of labor and work that can go into it and having to balance it out.
So my answer on this is that I would never say no to things without properly, going through them all. In the last, I will say, year, I have been so focused on writing that I haven't read anything. So I haven't actually gotten to TJ's works yet. I haven't gotten to Bloodbath. I haven't gotten to the Dying Breed series, Hunters and stuff like this. And I'm a shit friend for not doing those things. Especially as he's just like, kind of jumping in, being like, I'll arc read it, I'll promote it, I'll do all of these things. And I only listen to audiobooks. I'm like, all of this sacrifice, man. And I'm over here being like, oh yeah, I'll get to it, buddy. And I was saying like, I need something to read on the plane, write faster. And he's like, I wrote 75,000 words. I'm like, oh shit. And like another friend of mine sent me over 3 chapters, and I was like, I will do this. And I saw like each chapter was like 12,000 words. I'm like, motherfucker,
I will not do this.
I got through the first chapter, and I'm like, I am definitely going to read the, and like, and my body just said no. Great story, but I just can't. Like, sorry, the last book I read was Wandering Warrior Judge with from Michael Head, and that was when I was in Lake Garda on holiday, and he was saying like, hey man, like I want your advice on this. I was like, absolutely, I want to help. But like TJ writes so much, and it's just like I was like, oh god, I need to sit down and like read 7 books. So, but I will be getting around to it. So I can't say for certain that our styles would match. I don't know if they would, because TJ's, from everything I can tell, TJ really resonates with fights, and I resonate with everything else. So it's, again, not something I would ever like close the door on, because who knows what the future will hold. But what I would say is that for me, right now, if I'm not writing Quest Academy, it'll be Wildcards that I'll be going back to, because I'm raring to get back to it. And then like if I was to come out with something, a third thing, I'd be lynched. So when I posted on Royal Road being like, hey everyone, I got a professionally published book, it's Quest Academy, it's completely done, and book 2 is like almost done too, and they're like, yeah, that's cool, I'm really happy for you, where the fuck is Wildcards? I'm like, cool, thanks, okay, good to know where you are.
Well, and that's what that question was posed to me as well with Angel Ramon when I was on his podcast, and I said the same thing. I would never want to say no. But now as I'm going through it, I at least learned a lot more. And it is one of those things of what's the right timing? What's the right fit? What's the right this? I had someone reach out to me. I've had 2 people reach out to me asking me if I'd be considering doing ghostwriting, ghostwrite for them, or even write their story. And I was like, hey, it's not that I'm saying no. It's the fact that I need you to understand there's like 15 books that are ahead of yours. So are you willing to wait 3 to 5 years? Because like, you're not going to care about your story as much as, someone else whose story it's supposed to be.
And logistically as well, it is currently what, 3:20 where you are?
Yeah.
It's 11:20 p.m. for me. So it would literally just be untenable. Also, I'm working a full-time job and then doing writing. So you can see, like, I don't usually look exhausted. But it's just my life now. But yeah, it's again like down the line potentially when certain things maybe align. Who knows? But for right now, nothing in the works.
I think if anything, not to necessarily do a co-authorship. Like I what's been fun with Ryan is when I get to go in and look at his work or have him go into my work, you start to see more peer review. But we've also live wrote together. Like we've done a video chat here and live wrote in Google Docs, which has been really fun. Like we got a lot of laughs. But I've definitely seen it has helped me as an author to find my errors a lot better, right? So there's been great benefit to it, and I've enjoyed it. I think, though, the approach I would probably take in the future is what Jez and Don Chapman and those guys did, Lars, where, hey, let's just all write stories within the same universe. And then we can kind of headbutt together and have fun. I think that would be even really cool. So.
Absolutely. And like the other thing as well is when I look at the likes of Viridian Gate Online, like I am really investing into building the world for Quest Academy. And eventually it could be down the line where I say to Michael Head, I might say to yourself, I'd say to Jazz, be like, hey, do you want to write a side story for a guild within this world? Or like, do you want to write the origin story of like before you were a lecturer, and just like kind of world build from that element. And stuff like that could end up being things that like I would explore down the line. But again, I've one book out. So like,
but it's a great book. it's awesome.
It's a great book, but it's like, look, we'll see when I'm at book 4, book 5, and see like if there's staying power, if it's still popular. Look, you never know. I could be MC Hammer. I could be a one-hit wonder.
Yeah,
or just wear the hammer pants.
That's that comedian I sent you on Instagram. Where it's like, one book fucking nailed it. Don't need another one. Kyle, I think imposter syndrome will always come into effect, but just keep writing because you're begging for the next book. You'll always have dedicated fans that will be begging for what you put out next. Absolutely. I've been begging him for months. Don't be afraid to evolve and grow. Change is expected, but core values are prevalent throughout. Your thoughts?
Excellent. No, I agree with both sentiments. Thing is, I've been evolving and growing all the time, and it's hopefully always for the better. With imposter syndrome, like the thing is, I am a cynical person by nature, and which other people call negativity, I call it realistic. It's a case of like sometimes I will look at how I'm doing and be like, but it could all come crashing down tomorrow. As in, like, what is in place to stop? Like, how do I keep this going if Amazon is like, you know what, you're done. I'm like, okay. So, and there's a lot of those kind of things where I'm like, okay, I can never be complacent. Right. And even if people are telling me, oh my God, your book's amazing, it's fantastic, it's going to do so well, or it's X, Y, and Z, I'm like, that's nice. Tell me when I'm on book 10. Like, I know that for me to make this a career in the future and for me to make this feasible for myself, I need to create a roadmap for myself, and I need to kind of find a way to get there. Like, as I got to the end of book 2, I realized that my own personal health had taken a battering. In that
and it still is. right now.
It still is, and it's a case of like, and it's not even just down to, even if I had gone to sleep an hour ago, TJ, I would have woken up after 3 hours in a panic, or I would have woken up sweating and be like, what the fuck's going on? Because I'm just anxious at the moment. And it's just like my diet's wrong. There's so many things where I'm not exercising, I'm not going out into fresh air. I'm just kind of like going through the motions and reacting rather than being proactive. The only things I'm being proactive with at the moment are essentially writing and job. And there's a lot more, like my own personal time and things like that. Those are things I need to work on. Those are things I need to carve out for myself and not vilify myself for taking them. Because that month where I wrote 3 chapters, that wasn't a relaxing 27 other days. That was a guilt-fueled 27 other days where I felt personally liable and responsible for not having written anything. Whereas if I had carved out 2 weeks for myself and said, this is holiday time and you'll come back into it with a fresh mind, then I could have been productive for the following 2 weeks. Right. But so you know what I mean? It's like when you
feel I haven't been writing for 2 weeks now, at least more. I feel like shit. I hate it. I hate not writing. And yeah, it really eats away at me. But I'm like, you know what, dude? You just released a story, your longest story you've ever written.
Mm-hmm.
You are editing 2 books. Like, I have to edit book 3, get it done, get it to Catherine. I then need to re-edit book 2 of Call Sign Bloodbath to upgrade it with new chapter name or new character names, etc. Like, you have to do this. You wrote half the amount of your career within 3 months, 3.5 months. Now you need to do the editing, and you'll get back to it in a little bit. So it's definitely trying not to beat myself up over that.
Absolutely. And it's giving yourself a break. Because if you're treating it like a business, like we are the worst fucking employees known to man because we are not taking care of ourselves. Like it's a case of like, you know, it's just like, hey, you know, you're supposed to clock out like 8 hours ago. And it's like, no, I got this. Trust me, I've got this. And you're like, okay, I'll check in next week when you're dead. And it's like, yeah. So
I woke up at 3 a.m. with this great idea. So I wrote it down. And then I was like, why am I writing it down? I'll just go write it. So I went to write it. And now it's 6 a.m. I have 4 pots of coffee in it. Okay. TJ needs to go sit down. TJ needs to take a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never thought about looking at things that way. I've heard
practical instead of pessimistic.
Yeah. And then of course Brandon, he can relate. So thanks for sharing.
And is there anything that helps support y'all? Positive reinforcement and affirmation that we are not insane.
Yeah.
Because we're essentially just sitting down in an isolationist kind of profession where, like, I looked up the stats with my writing speed and everything like that. It was 160 hours it took to write book 2.
This person knows all about that too.
Yeah. Geneva, when you take a break, I will. Yeah, when you take a break, I will, okay? How about that? But it's but no, like really, it's one of those things. Like I could give the cop-out answer, be like, oh, what helps support us? It's like, I'll buy a book and stuff like that. That really does help. Don't get me wrong. Leaving reviews, that absolutely helps. And like, you know, shouting out to other, you know, people to kind of spread the reach of our books, that is a massive help. Like, because there's a lot of super fans out there, and I'm so like, yeah, in 2025, that's when I'll take a break. But there's so many things where it's like, there's so many moving pieces that like I literally at 4 o'clock in the morning will go on and see if there was any new reviews. I read every single one. I read every comment I get in Royal Road. I never lose a single one. I watch everything. I do searches on Reddit for my own name to see if someone is saying something. I do searches for my book in all the different subreddits. I look online and I keep finding that South African charter school called Quest Academy. And I'm like, no, not you. And it's like, and just like, it's like all these fucking 10-year-olds in South Africa being like, Quest Academy. And I'm like, is it for my book? No. So this has happened twice, TJ. Okay. When I wrote Wildcards the first time, I called it Abidden, which was the name of the in-game. It's like the now defunct past term of abide, as in so Abidden. And I went into, I think it was the Lit RPG Authors Guild, and was like, hey, this is my story. And someone came in and was like, it sounds very similar to Abaddon, which is the fucking god from D&D. And I'm like, and they were like, you should change that. So I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm calling it Wild Cards. And everyone's like, are you fucking serious? And I was like, yeah, Wild Cards. That is the name I've settled on. And they're like George R.R. Martin's Wild Cards series that came out in 1987 and is still ongoing. And I'm like, fuck. And then so it's like, okay, I'm not changing it from Wild Cards. I've just upgraded my expectations to outperform George R.R. Martin. And that was a silly little thought in my head. If Wild Cards fucking got the same amount of reviews as Quest Academy, mine would come up first instead of George R.R. Martin, because they are not performing well on Amazon. So, and that is insane.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for that, Brandon. I really do appreciate it. So yeah, it's like I just hope people like the stories, and if they like them, to tell me. And like I feel like an awful hypocrite, because over the years I'd read a story and be like, I enjoyed that. And I wouldn't comment, I wouldn't review, I wouldn't rate or anything like that. And now I feel so disingenuous asking other people to do it. And like, I remember the first time where I read a story on Royal Road and it cut off, and I was like, motherfucker. And it's like, if you want the next one, go on to Patreon. I'm like, oh my God, is this how it feels? Right. And I was like, oh my God, I'm an asshole. And then I went off and I wrote 3 chapters for my patrons. I'm like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And they were like, cool, thanks, Brian. Or they were calling me James at the time. They thought my name was James. I went under James Northman for a while.
Yeah. I'll say, I think you really have hit it, because with Brandon, he is my highest paying Patreon member.
Can you hold the fort for a minute? I'm just going to...
absolutely. Absolutely. No, you're good, brother. So I think for myself, with Brandon finding the story and talking about the story, it's meant so much to me when you find a fan who just loves your work so much and is now giving you the feedback, right? And Brandon, I mean, it's like every other day that Brandon is posting and he is sharing excerpts from the book with me, and he's like, dude, as soon as I read this, like, this is how I'm feeling, and I'm engaged and I'm loving it. And so that was where, for me, it means a lot when people are buying your books, when they're reading your work. But when you have a fan that reaches out and is like, dude, like, this is what I've been looking for, I feel like that's been one of the greatest supports of all, is getting to hear from a fan who loves the world. And then one of the things also that supported me, or has really reinforced things, is when you have Kionis, who then comes in and says, dude, I want to write a story within your world. Can I have your permission? Right? For someone who is in the beta reading, development, editing, now approaching me and saying, dude, I love this world. Can I write my story within the world as well? That's kind of that validation of, dude, you wrote a really cool story. You built a really cool world. It's just taking a little bit of time for people to find it. So I think for me, having those fans that really resonate, connect, and give me the feedback, that has been such a huge support, such a huge motivating factor. So Kyle, does discussing military stories with fans help inspire you? TJ. Interesting. Does discussing military stories with fans help inspire you? So with Call Sign Bloodbath, I used a lot of my training and real world experience to try to put as realistic approach to it as possible. There was some embellishment, like when you shoot someone, they don't always, spurt out blood and everything else. There was some embellishment on some of those details to give that feeling and flair of Marvel Punisher and John Wick. Whereas a lot of the other things I said, no, these are real combative moves. These are real moves that I trained with my weapon systems, and yeah, so this is all real world, and I wanted to build that. So I feel like the military stories really helped inspire my writing, but I love to share those stories with fans to help us connect, to help them understand where I'm coming from, why I wanted to add certain elements. And like I was talking about earlier with Bloodbath, that one chapter, I feel like the majority of fans that dropped off did not like it, whereas the majority of fans who are staying with the story understand, hey, this is a real world thing that is going to happen. It's either you or this thing. Which one is going to survive? Right? And if you're in a situation of survival, guess what? We used to always say, if you're in a fight and you think it's going to end with one person living, it might as well be you, and you might as well be able to be the one who tells the story. So I wanted to be realistic, and I love sharing that stuff for us to connect with. As far as the fantasy series, I tried to do a lot more of the training aspect of how I had to build myself on an emotional, personal level to adapt to the training, to have the resiliency to overcome some of that stuff. So that was where, hopefully that answered your question, Kyle. But yeah, similar to how I look at it, I have to support your work. It just clicked. Yep. Watermelon. No. So, I mean, those are real. Those do happen. It's just not as much, but yeah, I mean, it's there for sure. Made me think of Gallagher, Brain Matter Everywhere. There's a lot of that in book 2 of Bloodbath. So welcome back.
Thank you very much. So so I'd pronounce that name Gallagher. I don't pronounce the G, the second G.
I would have said Gallagher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Kyle, your question's really sticking with me too.
Kyle has always been fantastic at questions. Like, even since like GuildifyCon last year, he's like on the ball with questions all the time.
Yeah.
Super
I remember him from GuildifyCon. Another thing too that really inspires me is other military stories. Like book 3 of the Dying Breed series is really inspired by the Alamo in San Antonio. And there's actually a story from Pakistan, some Pakistani military members. God, it was hundreds of years ago, I believe, a couple hundred years ago, that fought off a Muslim army coming in to invade. If I remember, maybe it might have been India, but I mean, I watched the movie, I looked at the story, I was like, this is so inspiring. So that was where I wrote book 3 to be somewhat of that type of an emotional connection. So man, I love military stories. I love real world stories. There was a documentary I just watched about one of the world's most renowned thieves. And so I've created a side story based on Golgoth's character, which is all basically a thievery story based off of how this criminal approached his bank heists and all of his other stuff. So I was like, hey, I think you can find inspiration from many different sources, and I don't think there's anything wrong with adapting it to make a great story for your readers to enjoy. See y'all at the next GuildifyCon. Hopefully I get to moderate some of y'all's panels because I'll get to laugh right alongside y'all. You know what? I feel bad because I just enjoyed our time at Vegas, and I know that you and I are going to get to hang out in Georgia and Vegas. So yeah, there's going to be some good times there as well.
So, like, Kyle, are you going to be going to Dragon Con, by the way? Question goes to anyone that's in the audience. Are you going to Dragon Con, TJ?
Yeah, I am, dude. So that's where I was like, dude, we get to interview, and then like 3 days later, I get to bear hug.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, Kyle. Hopefully, we'll have GuildifyCon anyway.
We'll always have GuildifyCon, Kyle.
Yeah, and I will see you in Vegas, TJ, as well. But yeah, it's I know I'm looking forward to it, to be honest. A lot of cool, like, little surprises in the works for when we're there, which is exciting.
Oh no!
Talk about.
I feel like this is retaliation for the Major BJ shirt.
Oh, nothing of the sort. I would never do anything like that, TJ.
You're full of shit. I have so many great photos for you to use for my Facebook too.
I know it's always going to be like, Poundland Vin Diesel. That'll be yours.
Hell yeah.
Is Poundland? Oh, it wouldn't be. It's like a fucking dollar store. Like, like where you get shitty like variants of toys and random crap you never need, but it all costs like $1.
That's Dollar Tree.
Dollar Tree. Dollar Tree Vin Diesel. That's what I would put on your t-shirt.
Yeah.
No.
There's a lot of people in trailer park women that would love to get a Dollar Tree Vin Diesel.
Nice.
So I guess, moving in now, we've got about a half hour left. Hey, you know what? Sometimes the truth hurts, Brandon. And it's all jokes, right? Sure. What would you say are some writing tips? Some things that you could share with aspiring authors, some things that you've found that have really helped you that, hey, I've been there, I started, here's what I would recommend.
So many. So the first one would be mental resilience. Understand why you are writing. That's the first one. Are you writing for you or are you writing for others? Do you want to make money from it? Or do you just want to have the accomplishment under your belt that you are, you just want to have written a book? Is it for the clout? Is it for the acknowledgement from others that you have written a book? Is it a status thing for you? Or is this potentially going to become a sustainable career for you? Right. Is this to make an extra little bit of money? And just to clarify, there's nothing wrong with any of those reasons. Okay? The thing is, though, you need to understand what it is to frame how you approach it. And to approach it, if you are writing to make money, you need to understand what books sell. Because if you write a passion project for yourself or things like that aren't to the market expectations, then you are going to have a much harder challenge ahead of you. Because it's difficult. And one of the biggest things, like in any of in your chosen genre, read what's popular and read what has staying power in the top ranks. What is continuously popular and why? Understand those things. The more you read, the more you'll start to question, maybe I would have done that differently, or maybe I would have done that. Oh, I liked what they did here. Things like that. So that's the kind of the motivational stuff is one thing, and the reason why you're doing it. Resilience is the second thing. And this comes in two categories. So resilience is on how people respond to you. If you decide to go the serial route and you are going to write chapter by chapter by chapter and post that up online for the world to see, you are going to be receiving either criticism or you're going to be receiving praise from strangers, but strangers that are readers of this genre. So you, like a lot of people say, don't bother reading the comments or reviews. I disagree. Absolutely do. But understand that they are not attacking you. They're not attacking your story. They are providing their feedback. And that's what you should, and only take what you agree with. And, and if a lot of people are saying one thing and you don't agree with it, then maybe you need to take a harder look at it. But the resilience comes in another category as well. Yeah, the constructive side, Brandon. So the other side of the resilience is understanding that it is a marathon and it is not a sprint. And that all of us have very different levels in that if you are going to be, doing a 10K marathon or something like that, or you're doing an ultra marathon, a 56K or whatever it is, you might have a completely sedentary lifestyle and you're sitting on the couch all day. You're not going to go out and be like, oh, I'll just do 20K today and I'll do 20K tomorrow. And it'll all work out. Writing is very much a marathon, and you need to kind of like start your muscles slowly. You need to really build on them over time, but you need to understand the time investment. Since it's lit RPG a lot of the time, and we all like playing games and stuff, what I would encourage you to do is to look at your Steam list and look at the amount of hours you have put into some of your favorite games. As I said before, I put in 160 hours into Quest Academy Book 2. But that 160 hours doesn't reflect the amount of hours that I spent staring at the screen or pausing in between those moments. Because if you were to do that, it could end up adding another 140 hours to it, of like that it actually took me 300 hours. Now, if you go through all of your list of games and you're like, oh, The Witcher, I completed that in 85 hours. You're like, cool. The amount of time it took you to do that, it took me maybe 3 times that to write Quest Academy Book 2. And that is very much focused and in the zone, going line by line and stuff like that. I would be perceived as a fast writer. So for you to write a book, and now again, this is at the length of 200,000 words, which is too big for some people. Other people would write 100,000 words or something like that. And this is the thing where you are looking at it and saying, okay, I need to dedicate 200 hours to this project. That's something that you can't do in a day or a week or even 2 weeks. Like, that's something that you need to pace out over a number of months. And you also aren't including the time that it takes to ideate, to recuperate, to like refill it. If you think of like a Brita water jug, like, and you're pouring the water in, all the time, as you live your life and all these experiences and stuff, you're filling that water. And it drains through and it creates that creep. That's your work that's being created as the water filters through. But when that water runs out, you're not able to add to that manuscript because you need to refill the tap. You need to refill it from the top. And that's life experiences. That's hanging out with your friends. That's playing games. That's reading books. That's all these other things. And there are a lot of the things that you don't see a lot of people talking about. They talk about just write, keep writing, got to keep writing, got to keep going. That's the grind. If you can't do it, then, it's not for you, which is bullshit, because it absolutely could be for you, but you need to find your cadence. You need to find why you're doing it. You need to understand and plan out how you're going to do it. I'm not saying that you need to write out the outline for every single chapter. I'm saying that you need to understand that it is going to be a marathon.
Yep. Well, that's like why I told Kionis when he's like, hey, can I start writing? I was like, dude, I do not expect you to be done for a year. Take your time. And so when he's like, 700 words, I'm exhausted. I was like, yep. And you're going to have that a lot, buddy. Strap in.
And that's the other thing as well, is like a lot of people with pacing, they're like, oh yeah, no, I have all these ideas and stuff like this. And then it turns into a janky mess as they try to compact everything and rush it to be like, oh yeah, I wrote my first novel and it turned out to be 12,000 words. And you're like, that is a lot happening in a very short span of time where I have no idea what's going on. And it's almost like every line is an idea that should be a chapter. You know what I mean? So it can sometimes be like, now, Kyle, this is the thing. If you hit a roadblock, okay? If you've been writing your first book for over 9 years and still haven't finished yet, I would be saying that iterationitis is going to be your downfall. If you constantly keep iterating on something and you're just not, getting through it, you're not everything like this, I would be saying, take a step back from it, start something you care less about, and completely refill the well. And just try something else, like maybe something that inspired you from another story, something like that. Like
fan fiction, anything really.
Absolutely. Because like writers are going to write all the time. So yeah, well, anything at all, it's just like, just keep writing. As in like, if your book is going to be a chunky boy, so be it.
It's a chunky boy. It's interesting because I literally wrote this down maybe 30 minutes before we jumped on, because I thought of it 30 minutes before that. And it really was resonating me because of some of the stuff that we have talked about in the past, and also some of the stuff that we talked about tonight, which is someone inspired by Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, where she said, you can't have courage without vulnerability. In order to be courageous, you have to expose yourself and be vulnerable, whether it's in battle, emotionally, whatever. And I was thinking about that as writers, where as a writer, you are really having to open yourself up to so much scrutiny. And the fact is you kind of have to start being comfortable with failure, or perhaps the trial and error process. Some may start out great and you can copy, paste, and repeat and just keep doing that, where others may have to work harder to find their audience. And so, hey, you wrote this story, you think it's the greatest thing ever. I'm going to put it out there. No one else likes it. Okay. Are you going to give up on writing? Are you going to realize, hey, that just didn't hit the mark? I need to get re-inspired, start filling up that top and letting it filter down and come up with a new great story.
Another thing that a lot of people see is like the book beside you there, Quest Academy Silvers. A lot of the kind of promotional material said like Brian's debut book. Okay. Brian's, first book and all this sort of stuff. I said at the start of this that I started writing when I was 15, or at least that I thought I started writing when I was 15. When I told that story to my parents, they laughed until they saw that I was serious. And at Christmas a year or two ago, they presented me with a book, a red book with gold trim on it. And it was the first edition of Brian J. Nordon stories, age 7. And it was from when I was 7, 8 years old. They compiled a list of copybooks of all the stories I had written as a child that I don't remember. And my father had typed them all out and, used Canva to put them all in. And there's like 40 stories in there. And they did this over months because my father types with 2 fingers and stuff. And it broke my heart and I cried. I was like, this is unbelievable. But if you think of that I've been writing since I was 7, I've been writing for 25 years. So if I've been writing for 25 years, I've written a very well acclaimed story over on Royal Road. I have 18 stories behind me under a pen name on Amazon. And I have countless stuff on Writers Cafe and like stories started and stopped over the years. I've been doing this for a very long time. If people are going to like say like, if I'm going to be doing my debut, I hope it does as well as Quest Academy or all these things are like, there's a lot of work behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. Mm-hmm. And it can be so discouraging if someone was to, it is really, really cool. There's a lot of, hi Mom. So, I'll tell you another one because like I love what my parents do. Like they just really like fucking parenting goals. Sorry for cursing Mom. But the thing was like when I was 15, I started working on construction sites on summer holidays from school. I was working in shops as well, and every time I worked there, like they wanted to teach me the value of money, and I was earning €350 a week as a 15-year-old. And I learned the exact opposite of the value of money because I'm like, and they're like, Brian, we're taking half of that off you, so you understand what taxes are. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. I have €175. And I was literally going into a bookshop and like, just like with a box being like, I'll take that shelf. Because all I knew back then was reading. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing any of these things. So I was like, yeah, just let's go. And then years later, this happened all the way up until I was like 19. And as you mentioned earlier, my 3rd year was in France of university. My parents were like, how much do you have saved? And I was like, I'll just get a job over there. I've been working since I was 15. I'll continue working. And they handed me like a loan book that says like there was €9,000 in it. And they were like, and that's how savings work. All the money they had taken off me, they had put into an account. And the only thing I could think of when I saw that was like, how the fuck did I spend $9,000 in the last 4 years?
And here we go back to the bookshop.
Just like, I'm selling all of David Eddings, all of David Gemmell, all of Patrick Ross, all of them. But it was very, very cool. But yeah, it's very easy to spend that money. God, I know. But yeah, like it's all I'd say is that if you're serious about writing, just start. Like, it doesn't have to be good. You just need to enjoy it. Just enjoy the process. Because if you don't, it's going to be a very, very shit career.
And that's actually kind of what Kyle said. First goal, write. Just start writing. Don't stop writing. Once you have finished what is in your head, then go back and start editing, but don't over edit. So I think that's the
Absolutely.
biggest thing. I think so many people get intimidated, or they're, I think it was actually Angel Ramon who posted this stats where they said, 80% of Americans say they want to write a book, and less than 12% ever actually finish.
So the other thing as well
probably
is
even
like,
less than that.
if you're driven by accomplishments and things like that, there's not a thing wrong with starting out with short stories, because they are essentially your start. Like, if it comes down to, like, okay, as I said with the erotica stuff, start, middle, and end, compacting that into 4,000 words or 5,000 words will teach you so much about how to do a gripping opening, being able to work on the dialogue, make people invested and care about your characters, put in your twist, whatever your shock is, whatever like that, and then put in your ending. And tying that all together in 5,000 words, that's a challenge. And then after that, then go on to maybe 8,000, 10,000. Eventually you'd be able to, and they're not all for waste. You could put in an anthology, which is essentially like your building blocks towards writing longer form stories.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, Brandon
Brandon.
really resonated with one of our honey badgers, so 5,000 accepted. I think honestly, dude, like when I started out, I was very much of that mindset of like big long story, big long series, everything. And then someone was like, dude, you need to submit to Anvil magazine. They're, anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 words. And I'm like, okay. And some of it was like, holy shit. Like having to compact stuff down, like you said, having to do all of that is actually a much harder challenge than what people give it credit for. To make it a really, it's but I do like that idea too, because when you're starting out with the great ability you have with something like Kindle and Kindle Unlimited, you can write 20 short stories, and
There's
then
an
you can
entire
say,
category.
there's my whole story. I'm going to take these 20 short and put them together, and you can literally start gaining followership, start gaining readers, start doing all this stuff. And hey, as long as you're not necessarily expecting to make a lot of money off of it, and you're just putting it out there free to gain experience and gain traction, like you can really start to grow your experience and skills.
Absolutely. And there's a category on Kindle called 15-minute reads. Like, there are literally short story sections where people want to go in for their commute in the morning. They want to read something short and like have it done and dusted on the train. Like, that's like there is a market for these things. And if it gives you the sense of accomplishment rather than the crushing failure and feeling of inadequacy for hitting a roadblock at 40,000 words, hitting a roadblock at 15,000 words, being like, oh my God, if I'm doing 100,000 words, I'm only at 15% or 40% of the way. I'm never going to get through this. Do you know what I mean? Like, and whereas if you hit something and you actually manage to knock it out in a week, like I gave a friend a challenge now. She has dyslexia. She is like, has always been told that she'd never be a writer, that she would, like this was not for her, that she should focus on art and other creative endeavors because words would never be her thing. I sat her down and I said, I want a 3,500 word story on whatever topic it is, and you have a week to do it. 500 words a day. And it was painful. And it was one of the funniest stories I can remember reading, because she wrote like it was a mystery all until the final like the final paragraph. And I was like, oh, you absolute bitch. It was like a dad joke. It was a leading all the way up, and she couldn't wait to see my reaction. And it was fabulous. It was so well done. And I was like, it hurt me to see that she had been told all her life that you can't write, or like English teachers would fail her and everything like this, saying, this is terrible, this is terrible. And she was absolutely phenomenal. But she doesn't have the confidence in like, going further than that. And she's a character in Quest Academy as a tailor. which is very interesting, which you'll probably remember. But yeah, so sorry, one there from Kyle. My writing has gotten better ever since I started DMing D&D. It made me have to think on my feet so that when random things my PCs did stump me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and like being able to think and like pivot and stuff like that is absolutely brilliant. But the other thing as well is that you're able to percolate on a lot of these things as a writer. You can just sit in silence for 30 minutes and be like, yeah, okay, that's cool, without anyone staring at you being like, come up with something really engaging fast.
Right. Nope, 100%. 100%. And honestly, I think, I was thinking about
D&D
this.
dice, what's cracking?
I thought about it too. I've been thinking about it too with like the dying breed. And some people are like, some people want such in-depth stories or mechanics or systems because you hear of these major popular authors. And sometimes it's like, you know what? You don't have to spend 4 years developing a system.
No.
As long as the story's fun and engaging, people are going to love it. They don't necessarily need, the molecular level of chemistry of how this all works.
Like, there's so many people that have left reviews being like, oh wow, you can clearly see the meticulousness of this system and how it was all planned out beforehand. And I'm like, was it though? Was it?
I only laugh because we've had these conversations while you were writing book 1.
I'm like, what the fuck am I doing, man?
What's next? Oh, I have no idea. Whatever comes to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
shout out to D&D. Some characters in your book decide to do something random you never expected, and sometimes it's just as good. Yep. Dude, 100%. 100%. It makes it almost better. I think that's where I love writing in Golgoth's perspective. The character you have, Brian, in the poster, because it's just like you get to play with certain things within yourself. Like, hey, I want to pretend to be this creepy guy. Well, Golgoth is the creepy guy. What is something that you go with it, run with it? So yeah. But all right, guys, we've basically hit our 2-hour mark. So if there's any final questions you have for Brian, definitely put them in the chat. We'll stay here for about the next 30 seconds or so for you guys to type them up. But other than that, I mean, I want to make sure I get my friend his sleep that he needs because I'm going to get to hang out with him for 3 days and stalk him all around.
Yeah. Wait, how long is Dragon Con?
It's only like 4 days. But see, I fly in on Wednesday. I don't actually fly out until the 6th of September. So I'm staying there for an extra like 2 days to just kind of hang out and relax.
Interesting.
Kyle, so links to the books, all the links, dude, are in the video description. Like literally you'll see it has a section of Brian's links. So Amazon page, Facebook, Legion website, and then it goes into all of my links. So
yeah, give me a second. I need to figure this out of how long I'm going over for. Because I think I might be doing the exact same as you.
Oh, really? Heck yeah, dude. Brandon, same thing, brother. It's all in the description, man. Really glad you guys tuned in. And of course, Mom, I've loved this. It was fun but informative. It's always a great time with Brian.
Oh, thank you very much, Mom. Getting closer to takeoff. Just tell me where my fucking flight is. Yeah, I'm leaving on the 5th of September.
Oh, the day your audiobook drops.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. That is when that happens. Yeah, so the 5th of September is when I leave. Which is
what day do you fly in? Wednesday?
Yes, I will be there, landing in the afternoon on Wednesday.
Okay.
No, wait, that's London. And then London to Atlanta. It's like time travel. It's like,
I love how we're giving out this kind of more private information that we could have been sharing on the backside.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Kyle, yeah. So, by the way, Kyle, I've listened to the audiobook for Quest Academy, and Daniel Wisniewski and Rebecca Woods have absolutely knocked it out of the park. There's certain voices I love in it that I'm just like, oh my God, that is a stroke of genius. which is quite funny. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you think of it. But I was very, very impressed by it. But yeah, well, any other questions for us before we wrap up?
I think that's about it, man. They've had their time. Readers, content people. Oh, what do we got?
Torturing you. Well, you know, that just comes with the territory. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
As I told you, villains, the best.
All right, everyone. Well, hey, we're going to tune out here. But again, thanks so much for everyone who has tuned in, for the Patreon followers who support me and all of us like content creators. We thank you guys so much. We would not be here without you guys. So shout out to you and to all the viewers who watch us later on whenever you guys can tune in.
Looking forward to seeing you too, Geneva.
We'll see you as well. So, all right, everyone. We'll head out here and we will talk to you later.
Bye-bye.